Hi, I'm Nat Barnes. I was born and raised in Liberia. I spent much of my childhood between Harper City, Maryland County, and Monrovia, Liberia. Early education was at Methodist School, which is now the J.J. Roberts School, and then I went on to CWA and spent a very short time at the University of Liberia. I then was fortunate enough to travel to the United States, where I obtained my college degree, bachelor's degree in finance and risk management, and was fortunate enough to go on and get an MBA of concentration in banking and finance. I came back to Liberia and got married to a lovely Dawn Cooper Barnes, and we have 6 children. I left Liberia in 1981 and spent a long time in the U.S. working in corporate America in the telecommunications industry for nearly 17 years. I returned to Liberia in April of 1998 and worked at the Ministry of Finance as an analyst, and then later on was asked to serve as Director General of the National Social Security and Welfare Corporation. Thereafter, I was deeply honored when I was appointed as Minister of Finance by President Taylor in 1999. The hardest thing I've ever done in my career, but it was. And thereafter, I resigned as Minister of Finance, and then went into private practice. Throughout my life, I've focused on one thing and one thing alone, that of service, serving my fellow man, because I believe in the basic biblical concept that for of those to whom much is given, much is required. Now, I've been richly blessed, and I do have this moral obligation to reach back and help others less fortunate than myself, which unfortunately happens to be the greater part of our country, Liberia. I attempted for the presidency in 2005 unsuccessfully. It was my first foray into electoral politics, and man, I grew and learned quite a bit. I was unsuccessful. I ended up somewhere in the middle of the 22 candidates that ran. I think I was 11th, if I'm not mistaken. But it was an incredibly rich experience for me. After that, I again went back into private practice, and I was asked shortly after Mrs. Sirleaf became president in 2005 to serve as ambassador and permanent rep to the United Nations. What an incredible experience. I grew, I learned. As far as I'm concerned, the UN is the gathering of some of the smartest people on this globe. And in that particular environment, I grew, and I think I had a significant impact in terms of our country, Liberia. We were the focal point on having the sanctions on Liberia lifted, the economic sanctions, and we did so successfully. And that was a crowning point in my diplomatic career, to sit with the Security Council and negotiate the lifting of the sanctions. Thereafter, I was asked to serve as ambassador to the U.S. after serving for 2 years in the United Nations. And I went to Washington, D.C., and again had a wonderful career there. In that process, we were able to keep Liberia on the U.S. foreign policy radar screen, and Liberia was the second largest recipient of U.S. aid and assistance in sub-Saharan Africa. That wasn't done just by magic. It took quite a bit of work and a lot of engagement. Engagement primarily with the United States Congress, who holds the purse strings and make such decisions, where we consider ourselves very successful there. In November of 2010, I was recalled and came back to Liberia and started a small business. Since 2010, I've been listening, spending a lot of time listening to the people of Liberia. And there's a lot of suffering, there's a lot of deprivation, a huge amount of poverty. And as I said, I spent all of my life trying to make a small contribution in alleviating or removing these hardships. And I'm very proud that I've served with dignity and done so with quite a bit of credibility. But I've been listening to people, and I've come to one conclusion. Liberians understand what is happening to them. They understand the deprivation, they understand the poverty, they understand the corruption, they understand the impunity. And I think they're coming to a point where they realize that they can do something about this. And I've always, when I've had the opportunity to speak to everyday Liberian folks, I've said to them, always remember that no matter who you are, what you are, you have power. Now, your power may have been taken away from you, or you may have abused your power. But remember, it's time to take your power back. And the whole thing about people in Liberia now, my whole vision as to what needs to be done in Liberia, it's one simple word. It's empowering people. We must empower every Liberian economically, socially, and politically so that it can participate fully in the decisions that will make our country great and prosperous. So I come from a legacy of servants. My father served, a very unique individual. He served in all three branches of government. He worked at the Ministry of Justice as Solicitor General. He worked in the Judiciary Branch as an Associate Justice on the Supreme Court. And then eventually he was a member of the House of Representatives. My mother is a teacher all of her life, professional life. She worked in the public school system in Liberia and is responsible for molding the minds of many Liberians. She eventually owned her own school. She started the Barnes Foundation School. Her mother before her was a teacher, and her mother before her was also a teacher. My father's family, my uncle was ambassador and permanent rep to the United Nations. My grandfather founded and ran the Nathaniel Barnes Elementary and Kindergarten School in Harper, which still exists today. And so on and so forth. So I do come from a background of service, public service, and I'm very, very proud of that particular legacy. I also know my people. I've lived with them. During crisis, I've stayed here. During the Ebola crisis, we were here trying to volunteer and again help and make a difference. But I spend time listening and I know my people. I also believe that I have the skill sets. I have the vision, the skill sets, and the basic qualities and characteristics that's going to be required to take us to the next level. But at the end of the day, the power is with the people. And my appeal to Liberians all over the globe is it's time to take the power back. It's time for you to exert the fact that government officials are your employees. They're your employees and not your employers. And it's just time to take the power back and work together. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not going to be easy. It's not transforming Liberia, it's not going to be an easy thing. It's going to take sacrifice. But the most important thing is we all must participate in this sacrifice. It cannot be one where a few, as it has been historically, where a few sit back and relax and enjoy, and the masses are the ones making the sacrifice. That has to change. And with the appropriate leadership, we can, as a matter of fact, make Liberia great. Thank you very much. God bless all of us. God bless Liberia.